ever get this feeling? Like somebody else is really calling the shots, not the folks we vote for, but, somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings of the economy and politics and all that. Well, today, we're going deep on a book that might just explain it all. James Burnham's The Managerial Revolution.
Oh, this is a fascinating one.
Yeah.
Written back in 1941.
Way back.
Burnham predicted a new kind of power structure emerging, one dominated by, get this, a managerial class.
A managerial class.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to explore how this class operates, whether Burnham's predictions, actually panned out, and what it all means for us, living in the world today. What do you think?
Well, Burnham's main argument was that traditional capitalism, the kind where you have, the wealthy owners directly in control, that was on its way out. Instead, he saw a new class rising to power, a class of managers, not owners, but people who get their influence from their expertise, their ability to control really complex systems.
So instead of like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies of the past, we've got a new set of power players, like Tim Cook over at Apple. Brilliant. But they don't actually own those companies, do they?
That's right. They're managing them for millions of shareholders.
And every decision they make has these ripple effects throughout the global economy. It's crazy when you think about it.
And it's not just companies, is it?
Right.
Burnham predicted this separation of ownership and control would extend to the whole economy.
The whole shebang.
Think about these huge investment firms, BlackRock, Vanguard. They own massive chunks of the stock market.
Yeah.
But they don't run the companies they invest in.
So who does?
Who do you think?
I'm guessing those professional managers. So they're the ones making the day-to-day decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not like the old school capitalist owners, who are they? Where does this managerial class come from?
Well, Burnham saw this new elite coming from all sorts of places. You've got your corporate executives, government officials, military leaders, tech experts, scientists. Anybody with the specialized knowledge needed to make sense of our increasingly complex world.
So anybody who can, manage these complex systems, regardless of the actual industry they're in.
Exactly. Think about it. Our world relies so much on specialized knowledge now. Take Amazon's delivery network, for example. It's mind-bogglingly intricate. Or the algorithms that decide what you see on Google or Facebook. These systems are so complicated that you need a certain kind of expertise to run them.
And that expertise, that's what gives these managers all the power. But this doesn't just apply to the private sector, does it? It seems like this managerial class is just as powerful in government.
Absolutely. Look at regulatory agencies like the EPA. They're packed with unelected experts making decisions that affect all of us. And even elected officials, they have to rely on advisors and career bureaucrats, people with deep knowledge to help them craft policies on all sorts of technical issues.
So Burnham's vision was basically a world where the real power lies with the people who can manage these complex systems, not the people who own them. Whether we're talking about, a giant corporation or a government agency, it doesn't matter.
That's a great summary. And here's where Burnham gets even more interesting. He didn't think this rise of the managerial class was tied to any specific ideology. He said it was happening everywhere. Capitalist democracies, fascist regimes, even communist states.
How does that even work?
Well, look at China. They call their system state capitalism, but it's really a blend of government ownership and managerial control, isn't it? Burnham saw something similar in the Soviet Union back in his day. You have the Communist Party setting the big picture goals, but the day-to-day running of the economy was all handled by this massive managerial bureaucracy.
So even in systems that are supposed to be about, worker control, you still have these managers running the show. I mean, it makes me wonder if something similar isn't happening in Western democracies too. Sure, we have elections and all that, but sometimes it feels like it's the experts and the managers who are calling the shots, not, the people.
It's a question worth considering. And it brings us to another key part of Burnham's work, his critique of Marxism.
Marx predicted that capitalism would eventually be overthrown by a socialist revolution led by the working class. But Burnham, he had a different take on things.
Right. Burnham didn't see it as a shift towards worker control. He saw it as a shift towards managerial control. Socialist ideas have been influential, for sure, but we haven't seen those big worker revolutions in developed countries that Marx predicted. Instead, we have things like wealth redistribution programs, social safety nets. But guess who's managing those?
Wait, let me guess, more managers?
Giant government bureaucracies.
So even programs designed to help the working class are ultimately controlled by this same managerial elite.
That was Burnham's point. He saw the trend towards managerialism as a fundamental shift in how power works, something that goes beyond those traditional left-right divides.
But the big question is, was he right? Did his predictions about this managerial revolution actually come true? That's what we'll be digging into next. We'll look at the evidence for and against Burnham's vision, explore the power of companies like those we mentioned, Amazon and Google, and the whole idea of technocratic governance, and ask whether there are any forces pushing back against this potential for managerial dominance.
Should be interesting.
Absolutely.
Hey there, listeners. If you're finding value in our deep dives and want to dig even deeper, consider grabbing a copy through the Amazon link in the description below. And if you're an audiobook fan, you can dive in with a free 2-month Audible trial on us. Our gift to you. It's a great way to support the channel, explore amazing works on the go, and immerse yourself in these thought-provoking ideas. So, check out those links in the description, and thank you for supporting our work. And we'll keep the deep dives coming.
I'm ready when you are.
Let's do it.
So, picking up where we left off, this whole idea of a managerial class taking charge, it's pretty thought-provoking, isn't it? As we dig a bit deeper, how about we look at how this theory actually plays out in the world around us?
Let's examine the evidence. When we look at the world today, you can't really ignore the massive economic power in the hands of these companies like Amazon and Google.
Yeah, they're everywhere, aren't they?
They've become so, almost indispensable in our lives.
Their algorithms, they're practically shaping our choices. Their platforms dominate entire industries. Their reach is just vast.
It is.
Burnham might argue that these tech giants, they're the perfect illustration of his point. This small group of, expert managers wielding incredible power, they shape markets, economies, all to their advantage.
And they're not just shaping markets, are they? They're shaping our access to information, how we communicate with each other. It's not just tech either.
Right, think about globalization. We've got these multinational corporations with operations in, dozens of countries. They have so much power. And who's calling the shots? Who's making the decisions about investments, resources, navigating all the complexities of global trade?
The managers, right. It's almost like the whole world is becoming this one giant interconnected system. And the folks who know how to manage it, they're the ones holding all the cards, no matter where they are, what country they live in.
That's a great way to put it. And that kind of leads us to another area where Burnham's predictions seem to be playing out. This idea of technocratic governance. Ever heard of that?
Technocratic governance. Sounds kind of like science fiction.
Well, it's basically the idea that we're relying more and more on experts and their specialized knowledge to make decisions. And sometimes this actually overrides the more traditional democratic processes.
So instead of elected officials making choices based on what the public thinks or what their ideology is, they're kind of deferring to these experts who might not even be accountable to the voters.
Exactly. Think about central banks. The Federal Reserve in the U.S., for example. They have massive influence over the economy, right? They set interest rates, control the money supply, but they operate mostly independently of elected officials. They're guided by economists, financial analysts.
So even in a democracy, we see this shift towards rule by experts, not necessarily by the people or their elected representatives.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. And we see this in other areas too, don't we? Like during the pandemic, think about public health experts like Fauci. Their knowledge, their advice, it shaped policies that had a huge impact on our lives.
Yeah, it did. So it really does seem like Burnham was onto something with his predictions about this managerial class, but no one can predict the future perfectly. Were there areas where his vision didn't quite pan out?
It's a good question. The world is messy. It's always changing. One thing Burnham probably didn't anticipate was the rise of the internet. The way it's giving individuals so much power to challenge those in power, to get their voices heard.
It's given people access to information, ways to connect with each other that Burnham probably couldn't have even imagined.
Exactly. It's created new ways to challenge those in charge, whether we're talking about the traditional capitalists or this managerial class Burnham described.
And we've also seen these populist movements popping up all over the world in recent years, haven't we? Fueled by, distrust of elites, distrust of experts. Could you argue that those movements are a pushback against the very managerial class Burnham saw rising?
You could definitely interpret it that way. Burnham's predictions about the managerial class, yeah, they've mostly come true, but there are these countervailing forces at play. It's more complicated than he probably imagined back then.
So it seems like his framework is a valuable way to understand the power dynamics of our time, but it doesn't explain everything perfectly.
Right, but it's a starting point. It makes us think critically about, who really has power, how they're using it, and how these dynamics are always in flux, always changing.
This has been an incredibly insightful discussion so far. But how do these ideas, Burnham's ideas, how do they connect to what's happening in the world right now? Can his framework help us make sense of the headlines, help us understand, the forces that are shaping our lives today?
I think it can, actually. Burnham's framework gives us this really interesting lens to examine a lot of the big issues that are dominating the news right now.
But what does it all mean for us? For us regular folks trying to navigate this whole crazy world, it can feel kind of overwhelming sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. Burnham himself didn't really offer any easy solutions, didn't paint some rosy picture of the future,
Right.
He was more focused on, diagnosing the problem, not so much prescribing the cure. But I think his work really pushes us to be more aware, more discerning, more engaged with the forces that are shaping our lives,
So we can't just sit back and let this managerial class call all the shots. We have to be active participants.
Exactly. We need to be part of the conversation. Question assumptions, challenge the status quo, hold those in power accountable. That could mean getting involved in local politics, maybe supporting organizations that share your values, or even just, becoming more informed, more engaged citizens.
Sounds like knowledge is power, like they say. But even if we have the knowledge, that's not enough, is it? We have to actually do something with it, make good choices, advocate for the kind of world we want to live in. But where do we even start? I mean, we're talking about these massive systems, these giant structures, right?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Burnham reminds us that power is always in motion. It's always changing. And if we want to actually do something about it, we got to understand how it works.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. It really shows how the deep dive is all about giving listeners the knowledge and insights they need to make sense of the world. Hopefully it helps you navigate things, with more confidence, maybe even with a sense of agency, that you can actually make a difference.
Absolutely. And I think James Burnham, even though he had a bit of a pessimistic outlook on things, he'd probably be on board with that goal. He really believed in the power of ideas to change the world. He challenged us to think critically about the forces that affect our lives.
We've talked a lot about this managerial class, how their influence is growing, but it just hit me, we're all managers in a way, aren't we?
What do you mean?
I mean, we manage our time, our resources, our relationships, even our own lives, right?
Yeah, you got a point there.
So maybe we can take these insights from Burnham, apply them to our own lives, Can we be more effective managers of our own destinies, even in a world that's increasingly shaped by these big, complex systems?
I like that. That's a great question for our listeners to ponder. How can we use this understanding of power, of how it works, to navigate our own choices, our own lives?
And if you want to learn more, definitely check out James Burnham's The Managerial Revolution. We'll put a link to buy it down in the episode description.
It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand how the world really works.
And, as always, we love hearing from you. What are your thoughts on this deep dive? Did you learn anything new? Did it change how you see the world? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the episode, please do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. It helps us reach more people and keep these important conversations going.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.